So as we've been leading up to, and what I know many of you are here for tonight, is to begin this process of our becoming awake and knowledgeable. In these times, I have a few people on my Google alerts. Masha Gessen is one of them. Anything she writes, I read. And I encourage everybody in this room to do the same. There are few people we have in this country today who are as well poised to translate and explain for many of us who have not been in certain circumstances to understand. And let me say a few words why, and then I'm delighted that Masha will speak during the service about the current political climate, and then afterwards about her newest book, which is brilliant and riveting and a real page turner in the deepest sense of the word. I fashion myself a lover of Yiddish and all things Yiddish, and I actually know about Birobidzhan a little bit. And some of us in the community remember on August 12th, we've instituted at CBST the observance of the night of the massacred Yiddish poets. They weren't all poets, but in the Soviet Union. And one of them was David Bergelson, who was known as the bard of Birobidzhan, and asking some profound questions. When does a Jew know when it's safe to stay? And when does a Jew need to leave? And Masha is uniquely situated to ask that question in ways that are enlightening, provocative, frightening, and comforting all at the same time. So Masha grew up in Russia and was a teenager when she came here with one of the initial waves of Soviet Jews who got out of the Soviet Union as the result of the efforts of many people. Some significant members of our congregation were very involved in the Save Soviet Jewry movement of the late 60s and the 70s, which resulted in the waves in the 80s coming. And Masha and her family came out of the Soviet Union to Boston, where she lived as a teenager, and then went back to, after perestroika and things changed in Russia, and settled as an adult and became a brilliant and well-known journalist in Russia, and came out and was living as a queer person in what was then a fairly opening society. Vladimir Putin, in his regime, started cracking down and changing the laws threatening LGBT people, and for the second time, Masha came to the United States as a refugee coming from Russia, this time with an American passport and English, but with a family and children. As a result, Masha's understanding as somebody who speaks Russian and grew up in Russia and deeply understands the Soviet and the Russian mentality and culture, but at the same time came here as a teenager and speaks American, so to speak, and understands Americans, is uniquely situated to translate Putin and the Soviet enterprise and fascism in a way that we Americans don't often have that level of insight. And because she also understands Americans, she's an incredible translator of culture, not just language. I have read several of her books. As I said, I read everything you write, Masha, and I know a lot. But of all things, I have to say, and I've told you this, that I'm deeply in awe, that Masha, you might not know, is the translator for the TV show The Americans, and provides all the Russian dialogue on that TV show. So there are any number of reasons for which I'm a major fan of Masha. And so it's an honor that Masha is a member of CBST. And we were looking to you, Masha, in this time. And you have spoken here and given us great teaching and learning. And I'm really grateful to have you part of the community and to have your words and your insights out there. And so I'm delighted to welcome Masha Gessen to share some words tonight.
Thank you. I'm so glad you mentioned my real claim to fame. That's what really makes me excited and proud. But actually, thank you. It's such an honor to be speaking here tonight. And I think I was thinking when Rabbi said that we should think about what we're grateful for, and the one thing that I keep thinking is that what makes this dawning of a dark time feel very different than other dawns of dark times that I've lived through is that there's simultaneously the sense of an opening, of an intellectual opening and protest that is invigorating and stimulating, and I think has the potential to, to keep us safe. And there has been some incredible writing from a variety of people, and an incredible response. And I've enjoyed some incredible response and also some really weird response, including somebody who tweeted the other day that my name should actually be spelled Moshe because I will lead us out of this dark time. Which I thought, it really, I've gotten some over-the-top tweets, but I think this is absolutely the most over-the-top. But it's the most over-the-top thing of a number of things I've received, including private letters from people who are literally asking what they should do, and letters from people, for example, working, mid-level jobs in federal agencies, asking, should they quit now? Should they wait to see what happens? Is there the potential to do good while they're still working there? And that's a really difficult question to answer because we don't have sort of the coordinates in which to make those decisions. And I think that the question that people usually ask is, what is going to work best? The problem with that question is that we don't know the answer, and we can't know the answer. You can't ever figure out what is going to work. I think a much better question to ask is, what's right? But I think an even better question to ask is, what's wrong? I think we can't know what is going to work, and we sometimes can't even know what the right thing to do is, but we can certainly know, or we have a much better chance of knowing, what the wrong thing to do is. And I think that a guiding principle in these times can be not to do things that are clearly wrong, immoral, and indecent compromises. I think that there's something else that's been happening that I've been observing that in a way is the opposite of this sense of opening up. And that is this idea that what has befallen us in this country is the most tragic tragedy to have ever befallen anybody anywhere. It's really, you see that in some writing, and it certainly feels that way sometimes. But as a matter of fact, it isn't. It can be the most tragic tragedy that's ever befallen the world if things go in the worst possible way. But it's not the most tragic tragedy that's ever befallen anybody at this moment. There are actually things that we can learn from other people who have gone who have lived through dark times. And the words dark times, I'm actually borrowing from Hannah Arendt, who wrote an entire book called Men in Dark Times, and who spent a lot of her life thinking about how people live in dark times and what the decent way to live in a dark time is. And I was reading today a letter that she wrote in 1946 to the philosopher Karl Jaspers, her teacher, and I was struck by a phrase that I had never noticed before, which was that the only way to lead a decent human existence at this time is at the fringes of society. And what she was talking about American society just coming out of World War II. She was very disturbed by the social oppression she saw in the society. She posited that the social oppression was partly the result of great political freedom, that people sort of didn't bother with how horrible society could be because they had so much political freedom. But what also struck me about this letter were the examples she gave. She gave the example of keeping her own name after she married a German man because she wanted to be known as an independent working woman, but she also wanted to keep her Jewish name. She wanted to be instantly recognized as a Jew This is a decision that she made when she moved to this country during World War II. She was also writing to Jaspers, who just invited her to write for a German magazine, and she said, I would like to come back to Germany in my writing, but only on the condition that I could write as a Jew. And so she would only write on topics that were relevant to being Jewish. And I think that what she was saying in all those examples is that everything matters. And I think that if we remember not to do things that feel wrong and that seem wrong, and that everything matters, those are really good guiding principles that actually show some sort of a way forward. And I'm also really mindful of this idea of being decent at the fringes of society. I think that we as queer people certainly know what it's like to live at the fringes. And I don't think any of us wants to voluntarily go back to the fringes, but we can. We know how to survive at the fringes, and we know that it is better to be free and yourself and mindful of things that matter, and everything matters, at the fringes, than it is to stay in the middle of things and sacrifice yourself. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Masha. And I encourage everybody to join us after services downstairs in the Rich Marin room. Although if everybody joins us, we might have to come back up here. We'll see if everybody will. And I want to particularly recommend to people Masha's book, in addition to the newest one, which we'll be discussing, her best-selling biography or analysis of Vladimir Putin, which is, I think, essential reading for all of us in today's world. Thank you.